Hello, good morning. Today is a really exciting day. I'm out in the garden to harvest a little bit of basil because today I am preserving up some fresh tomatoes into tomato sauce. This is the first time I've ever done any canning, so I signed up for a community canning class at a local community center, and I'm just so excited. I have been chopping and cooking and preparing tomatoes all night long so that today I could be ready to foray into canning for the very first time. But before my sauce is ready to go into jars, I'm going to grab some basil out of the garden and add that to our sauce. All right, let's get into it.
I decided to order some paste tomatoes or tomatoes for making sauce from a local farmer's market. I have been growing my own tomatoes and I have a good number of them in the freezer of all different types of tomatoes, from my heirlooms to my more smaller ones, and I did put in a couple Roma plants as well. My Roma tomatoes aren't ready yet for sauce making, and I wanted to be able to participate in this community canning class that was going to happen at a community center near me because it was my first time canning and I just didn't really feel confident about trying it myself. Plus, I didn't have the equipment either. So I wanted to be able to participate in a class with someone who could help coach me along the way. So I decided to order some tomatoes so that I would be sure to have enough of the right type of tomatoes to be successful in my first time sauce making, and then I could experiment with my own tomatoes after I had, a little bit more confidence under my belt. Alright, here I'm chopping all of my tomatoes. The recipe that I have, it's a recipe for home canned marinara sauce that came highly recommended to me by someone who does a lot of canning. It is important that you use a recipe that has been tested in your canning projects because you want to ensure that, especially for water bath canning, the acidity levels are correct, that it will be a shelf-stable product. So I am using this recipe for home canned marinara sauce, which I can share in the description below if anyone is interested. The recipe calls for coring and roughly chopping the tomatoes. As I'm seeing how much work it was to chop all of these tomatoes, it did take me quite a long time. I would consider investing in one of those little tools that helps core the tomatoes more easily for next year. Also, I've seen online that some other folks will core their tomatoes as soon as they get them and then throw them in the freezer until they can use them, and that makes it easier when it comes time to make the sauce later. So I might also try that as well for my next canning project. Did I mention that I have to chop 20 pounds of tomatoes for this recipe? It's quite a lot. So while I'm chopping my tomatoes, I'm just kind of setting them aside in a bowl. Once I have about 1 pot's worth of tomatoes, I decide that I'm going to start chopping up my onion and my garlic so that I can get the sauce simmering while I get the rest of the tomatoes chopped. So the idea is that I'm going to start cooking down my sauce, and then as the tomatoes cook down, I'm going to add more fresh tomatoes on top. I don't have a large stock pot big enough to cook down. I believe the recipe calls for 18 pounds of paste or Roman tomatoes. So in order to do this, I end up cooking it in 2 different pots. I use my Instant Pot because that is the largest stainless steel stock pot that I have right now, on the saute setting to cook down the onions and the garlic, and then I add the tomatoes on top and I just keep stirring it and stirring it. And as the tomatoes start to cook down, then I'm able to add more fresh tomatoes on top. One quick hack for peeling your garlic is that you can take your garlic cloves and you can smash them. You can smash them at the bottom of one of your jars, or I'm using the back of my knife here. Fun way to mix it up in the kitchen, or whatever you need to do. But it helps release the paper skin from the garlic, and then that makes it much easier to peel. Okay, now that our garlic and onions are just about all chopped up, I'm going to get those into my stock pot to start cooking down. The recipe calls for cooking your onions and garlic until they are translucent, and then you are to add, or about 10 minutes, and then you add your chopped tomatoes, bring to a boil, simmer for about 20 or 30 minutes until all the tomatoes have broken down. So as I'm doing this, this is also in the middle of dinner time for my family, so I don't really have the time to sit over this pot constantly and cook this sauce down. So what I end up doing is chopping as many tomatoes as I have, putting my Instant Pot on slow cook setting, putting the rest of the tomatoes into my slow cooker on the high setting so that they can start breaking down as well, and then doing the rest of life dinner, bath, bedtime for my little one, and then I come back to the recipe later on in the evening. Okay, it is oh, excuse me. It is now much later, and I am finishing up with the tomatoes. So you can see that the tomatoes that I put in there had cooked down quite a lot. So I was able to add more tomatoes into my Instant Pot and finish chopping all the tomatoes that will go into the slow cooker as well. I let these cook down on a slow setting overnight because my Instant Pot was really just getting too hot, and you can see I'm scratching the bottom of the pan. I noticed that they're starting to scorch the bottom, but when I changed it to slow cook setting, it wasn't really boiling, like getting a strong boil. We do what we can. So here's the current state of affairs. Alright, it is now the next morning, pretty early in the morning. I'm down in the kitchen by myself, and I'm trying to push all of the tomatoes through a sieve to remove the skins and the seeds. So I've already done this for the first batch of tomatoes that was in the Instant Pot, and then I put the sauce that I removed from that into my saute pan, which was my biggest cooking utensil, so that I could get that to simmer down on the stove where I could control the temperature a little bit better than in the Instant Pot. And you can see here that I've given up on trying to strain the seeds and just decided to blend the rest of the sauce. It was quite labor intensive, and I felt like I wasn't doing a good job of removing all the skin and the seeds, and I was leaving a lot of the goodness of the sauce behind. So I decided for the rest of it, I'm just going to blend it up and we'll taste what it tastes like with seeds, and if we hate it, I won't do it again. But I needed to get the project done so that I could get to my canning class by 9 o'clock. So now I'm taking the blended up tomatoes and putting them in a pot on the stove. So essentially for the same reason. I want them to cook down, especially there's a lot of air and kind of frothiness to them right now because I blended them up. So I need all of that to settle and cook down into a thicker sauce that would be a good marinara sauce. So here you can see sort of the side-by-side difference. I guess it's sort of interesting that I ended up having to use two pots because you can see the sauce on the right is the one where I removed all of the seeds and skins, and it feels much thinner than the one on the left-hand side where I just blended the seeds and skins into the sauce. That one already feels much thicker, even though I put this one on the stove later. So interesting. I just sort of let them simmer down as I was doing other things and getting ready in my morning routine, coming back and checking and stirring periodically, and also cleaning the 8,000 dishes that I created. Here you can see really well the sauce that I made where I blended the seeds and skin into the sauce. So you can still see there's a lot of that tomato pulp and you can see the seeds, but it looks all right to me. I guess the true test will be the taste test once these jars are all done and finished. So you can see that this pot has really reduced a lot. By looking at the rim on the side of the pot, it's already reduced down by about half, and the sauce is much thicker now. So I'm really pleased with the results that we've had here. So showing the one on the right, again, that's the one where I used my colander to remove the seeds and skins, and the one on the left is where I just blended everything together. So the last thing that I have to do to prepare to can today is to wash all of my jars, lids, and rings. So I purchased some new canning jars. I did have some jars already, but I just wanted to make sure that the ones that I had were going to be clean and perfect and not chipped or have rusty lids or anything. So I'm putting all of my jars, lids, and rings into the dishwasher. All they need is a wash cycle. They don't need to be sterilized in a special way because the jars will be cooked to be safe when they're in the canner. The most important thing for preparing your jars for getting ready for canning is making sure that you have a new lid, because that is the surface that is going to be coming in contact with your food. And ideally you don't want to use anything that's rusty or old, and you want your jars to not have any cracks around the top of the jar so that you can ensure that your lid will get a good seal and you won't have a seal failure. And if that happens, it's actually not the end of the world. You just put your jar in the fridge and you use your sauce within a couple days or weeks so that you can use it before it goes bad, but it won't be shelf stable if it doesn't seal. I just wanted to clarify what I said there. So you can absolutely reuse your jars year after year after year as you're canning, and that's one of the beautiful things about canning in glass jars. But the lid, or the little round circle flat part, is the part that has to be new each time you use it.
So I'm harvesting a little bit of basil today to add to our tomato sauce. I'm really excited to get a chance to do some canning today. One of the things that's been on my list of things I've really wanted to try all year. And so today I'm actually going to have the opportunity to do some and to see if this is something that could, work for our family and be a way that we have more fresh produce from the garden for more seasons of the year.
I'm harvesting some basil here to add to our sauce, and I've got my favorite little garden helper who's eager to grab basil and help water plants as well. I really enjoy being out in the garden. It's fun when I get to do projects like this that use items from the garden, but being in the garden is definitely my happy place. I didn't get a ton of footage of the class itself. I wanted to just be present and also respectful of the other people there, so I didn't film a ton, but I got some clips of me loading up my jars with my sauce, and it was really satisfying and exciting to see them go into the canner, and now they're back home. I let my jars rest on our kitchen table for about 24 hours, and then I'm trying to lift them by the lid to test the seal. So when your jars come out of the canner, you set them down on the table, you let them rest for a few minutes, and then you should hear like a ping where the lid is suctioned onto the jar. You want to let them rest for 24 hours, and then you can check to make sure that the jars have sealed, and you can store them in your pantry. Always make sure to remove the rings. This is really important because otherwise you will not know if you have a seal failure and one of your jars is going bad. So I took off all the rings, tested each of the lids, and now I'm trying to label them. I'm struggling to find a marker that I feel like can write effectively on these jars, but as soon as I find a good Sharpie, we will have these jars labeled and ready to go on our shelves. One of the things that I've definitely learned from this experience is it helps to have the right equipment. After this canning experience day, I did hop on Facebook Marketplace and look for someone who had a water bath canner and a food mill and all the equipment that I would need to process this, and I purchased secondhand the things that I would need for my next time canning. But the second thing that I learned is that tomato canning is a labor of love. Making your own homemade sauce is a labor of love. It's not necessarily something you do because it's cheaper or easier than buying sauce in the store. It's because you want a really good quality of food for your family and you enjoy the process from planting seeds, tending the garden, harvesting the garden, and processing all the tomatoes down. Starting with about a 20-pound box of tomatoes, I ended up with really only 3 quart jars. So that is a lot of sauce, but also we use about one 20-ounce jar of sauce twice a week anyway, just in pasta and pizza and dinners. So 3 jars is not going to last us too long of a time, but it's an amazing accomplishment that I was able to can my own sauce for the very first time, and I can't wait to practice this skill and get even better at it. Friend, thanks so much for hanging out with me today in the kitchen. It was so rewarding and exciting to can tomato sauce for the very first time. Let me know in the comments, have you ever tried canning tomatoes? If so, what was that experience like? I'll link another one of my cooking videos in the description if you'd like to keep hanging out with me, as well as my August garden tour. I'll see you in the next one, friend. Bye.